What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I'm going to be talking about something that's kind of sad for me and probably entertaining for you, hopefully. I'm going to be talking about the 15 knives that I really regret selling. If you've been a part of the knife world for a while, whether you're a user, a collector, or any type of enthusiast, you have likely been through this. You have sold or traded off at least one knife that has left you with a sick, horrible pit in your stomach. I honestly don't know what's worse. Buying a knife that you have high expectations for and then it comes in the mail and you're like, yeah, this isn't what I expected. Or selling a knife that you think you're ready to let go and then realizing you made a horrible mistake after the fact. It's truthfully an awful feeling. I think the latter is worse, honestly. So I'm sure you guys are wondering, like, why is the lighting so dark? I'll get to that here in a second. The XM18 is just a placeholder while I talk. Given the nature of this video, I don't have these knives anymore, so I'm gonna copy something that Nick Chavez has done in videos where the knife that's the topic of the video, or the knives that are the topics of the video, if he doesn't have them, he simply uses an iPad and goes through slides to talk about things. Now, I know some of you guys don't like that. You're like, why are you making the video if you don't have the knives? I'm making the video because it's an extremely relatable topic. Almost everybody who's going to watch this video has been has had this happen to them or felt this feeling before, and if not with pocket knives, certainly with something. We've all felt that. So I've also been at this for a long time, like many of you, buying, selling, trading, collecting for years. So there's way more than 15 knives in this topic, but this video would get boring if I was listing every single one. So I narrowed it down to the 15 that make me feel the most sick. Definitely. Actually, going through this is going to be heart-wrenching, just remembering all of these. There's also going to be a handful of you who are like, well, how do we know that you actually had these knives? You're just going to have to take my word for it. Sorry, that's about it. Some of the pictures I'm going to show are actually my pictures with my hands in them. And they're going to be knives that you've actually seen on the channel. A lot of the knives that I'm going to show are going to be from before I actually started the channel. Some of them will actually, again, be my pictures. And some of these pictures I pulled off of Google because, number one, either the pictures I actually originally had of the knives weren't good enough for a video, they just don't look good enough, or because it was from so long ago that I just don't have the original pictures anymore. So anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and fold this guy up. This poor XM18 actually has to serve as the iPad's angle, just sort of helping tilt the iPad up to create the angle that I want for the video so that there's no glare on the screen. First up here, you can see this is a picture of a ZT 0562 CF. Now, this is not my hand, it's not my picture. It was generously provided by Google. This is a beautiful picture, by the way. If this is your hand, fantastic picture. Really like this one. My ZT 0562 CF, you guys have heard me talk about it before. It was my gateway folding knife. It was my first truly premium folding knife. Titanium, carbon fiber, and M390. I had one of the originals, which is really the reason why I wish that I had not sold this thing, because now getting an M390 model of this is a pain and very expensive. This knife transitioned me into a whole new world of folding knives where I was appreciating more than just the function, the aesthetics and everything. So truthfully, I owe probably this entire channel, or the motivation behind it, to this knife. It makes me sick to look at this knife. Let's move on here. Next up, another Hinderer ZT collaboration. This is the ZT 0560. Back when the 0550 was the original Hinderer collaboration with ZT, it was meant to mimic the XM18. So the 0560, the one you're seeing here, was meant to more so mimic the XM24, though it wasn't quite as big. This knife was only about 8 3/4 inches. Olamic steel originally. There was an 0561 version of this. There was also a blackwash version of this, and there was a special edition version with it was like laminate ZDP 189. I can't remember. This is the one I had. No steel lock bar insert, though some of them did have that because I think there were some lock face issues with it. Contoured golf ball textured G10 scales and golf ball textured titanium. That's what made this knife so cool to me, and that it was a Hinderer collaboration. I miss this knife so much. It is such a it's such a heavy sadness that I feel for letting this one go, because again, if I want it now, I'm gonna have to pay way more money than I originally paid. Next up, we have the Fantoni HBO1. You guys have heard me talk about this knife before. This is the only knife, my wife will say it's her favorite knife. It's one of the only knives that she actually likes. She's not really a knife person, so most of my knives, she says, are just hideous beyond all reason, especially my Spydercos. But she loved this knife. The HBO1 was a collaboration between Bill Harzy and Fantoni knives, so they're made in Italy. There's an HBO1, HBO2, and HBO3. These knives are made out of S35VN steel, G10 scales, and a titanium liner lock running on phosphor bronze. The HBO1 that I had was about 9 1/4, possibly up to 9 1/2 inches. It was a really big knife. I think it was 4.1 inches on the blade, but it had such a compact, really good blade to handle ratio knife, and it had such a compact, like straightforward design when it was folded up. So it was actually easy. It was one of the easiest over 9-inch folding knives that I've to carry that I've ever owned. There was also a special edition version of this, or a limited edition version, that came out in S125V steel. A lot of you guys are going to be familiar with that steel, at least from reading about it. Those of you who are not familiar with it, think higher edge retention than even S110V. The reason we don't see it around as much anymore is because it's very difficult to machine and turn into a blade without getting it to chip. It's super hard. Has excellent edge retention for people who can actually get it, sharpen it correctly, I guess. But mine was just the S35V version, S35VN version. I let it go, and now you have to pay, I want to say they're $80 more than I originally paid for. I want to say I paid like $200, $220. They're like $280 now. So I really miss that guy. I'm still considering actually getting another one. Next up, this was my first automatic knife. Back when it was very recently, became, I keep saying very recently. Right after it became legal in Kansas for people to carry automatic knives, I started looking for OTF, an OTF. Because I thought, that's like the quintessential switchblade. That's where it's at, And so I sought out to find out who made the best OTF, and as far as the internet was concerned, or at least blade forums at the time, Microtech seemed to be the most consistently brought up as, the maker of the best American OTF knife. And I think that's, for the most part, that's still the consistency, there's some competitors out there now, but Microtech still makes one of the best, if not the best, front opening or out the front opening automatic knife. So of course I was like, I want to get a dagger. Because it's one of the few knife styles where you can justify a dagger blade and not, risk hurting yourself as much as if it were on a folding knife. I wanted black, and these came in either LMAX or S35VN. Actually, I think they were still in S30V, some of them at the time. This was 2013 or so when I got this, maybe 2014. I bought it for $385 from Empire Outfitters. I remember that. I was so excited. This thing is huge. And forever, every OTF that I handle from this point forward, just going to keep the screen from going dark, will be compared to this one, because I want to say it's about 9 inches, has like a 3.75 inch blade. It had an amazing, powerful action. That blade rocketed out, locked into place, and then sucked back in. This was the most potent conversation piece I've ever had in my collection, and I'm honestly still considering going back and getting one now. But they're $100 more than they were back then. At I want to say they're between $465 and $485 now, so that kind of creates a problem. Mine looked exactly like this. This is not my picture. This is a beautiful picture provided by Google. Again, really miss that guy. Moving on here, you guys have seen this one on my channel. Excuse the glare there. This is one that I just couldn't fix with the lighting on the iPad and the angle there. This is a Chris Reeve large Inkosi with the micarta inlays. This is an upgrade from the standard. The standard being $450, the micarta inlay version you can get for $550. My buddy David actually bought this knife, and then after handling it, I traded him for it because I really, really wanted it. I loved this knife, and my plan was honestly to keep it in my permanent rotation forever. But as many of you know, sometimes you have big plans for folding knives, and then, you're like, I'm going to keep this thing forever. And then a week later, you're like, I got to sell it. I got to buy something else. And those plans just never come to fruition. And it's heartbreaking now looking back. I'm like, oh my gosh, why would I trade that? It was such a good knife. This in a lot of ways was the perfect Chris Reeve, and You know, it was finally, after handling a Sebenza and another knife that you'll see here in just a second, I kind of arrived at this conclusion, like, this is the perfect Chris Reeve knife. And it might just be. This is an awesome blade. I truly miss it. If I want to go purchase it again, I'm going to have to spend even more money. Not more than I, paid, but I lost money when I sold it, is what I'm saying. Next up, we have the Chris Reeve Umnumzan, the only other Chris Reeve knife that I've handled outside of the Sebenza and large Inkosi. I loved this knife. I loved the texturing on the titanium. Mine was one of the newer style pivots like you're seeing here. I loved the double notched harpoon style blade. I loved that it felt just more robust and bigger and stronger than the Sebenza 21. I also liked the Rick Hinderer style lock bar stabilizer and over travel stop. I really, really liked that because I was well into Hinderer knives at this point. And here's the only reason I sold it. It didn't give me the satisfying click because of the O-rings on the lugs up here. It was too quiet and soft, and I know I could have just taken those off, but then the knife didn't feel complete in its original form. I don't know. Some other knife came along, and I was like, I can sell my Umnumzan and get it, but now I regret it. I know there was here recently, there was a big long time period where these things weren't available. Maybe the drop points still aren't available. I feel like if I wanted this exact knife right now, I'd have a hard time getting it back, and I'd have to, again, pay more money for it because I lost money when I sold this guy. So another regret. Moving on here. A lot of you guys, maybe more recently, will be familiar with Olamic for their 247 or 247 Wayfarer. I had an original large Wayfarer, I guess you could call it, between mid-tech and custom. Not quite custom, but definitely higher than mid-tech. I bought almost this exact Wayfarer from Arizona Custom Knives for $585 a long time ago. It looked almost exactly like this, except mine was not a compound blade. Mine was a straight spear point blade in S35VN. It had G10 scales, titanium liners that were jeweled on the inside. At the time, one of the best flipping actions I have ever felt, and still to this day, if I'm remembering correctly, the length and weight of that blade, it just rocketed into position, and it was so solid, so satisfying. That pistol grip handle was amazing. The backspacer was awesome on it. I mean, the fit and finish was just unbelievable. If you've never given Olamic cutlery a chance, they make the best knives, like in that odd in-between spot between mid-tech and custom, and they have reasonable prices too. I mean, not a lot of people are going to want to go drop $800 to $1,000 on a pocket knife, but for those of you who do, check out Olamic knives, definitely. Now, this was the biggest version of it. This one was, again, like 9 1/4 inches. Back then, I was really big into, like, gigantic knives. They make a smaller version of this, the compact Wayfarer, then they make the 247. Those are about 8 1/4, 8.5 inches. They make some smaller knives now, but anyways, really, really miss that guy. Moving on here, this is a Chavez 228 mid-tech. Though fans of Jim Skelton's channel will remember his Chavez 228, his Chavez Redemption Custom, that huge thing with the 1/4 inch stock thick blade. After those customs, became popular, someone convinced him to do a mid-tech, and this was 8 inches, S35VN steel, full titanium. This is actually a version 2. There was a version 1. This is the exact one that I had. It ran on bearings. It was thick, 187 thousandths thick blade, so think XM24. And then the scales were at least 165 thousandths, which is the same thickness as a standard XM18 3.5 inch blade. So this was a chunky knife. But because there was no flipper tab, and because it was shortened up, it still managed to feel compact. A lot of you guys will know on the flip side of this, there's a skull clip. It's a polarizing clip. Some people love it, some people hate it. I really, really like it. I've reviewed his new production versions of these knives that are made by Riat. Are they made by Riat or We? I can't remember. I had a generous viewer offer to let me review his. Just going to keep the screen on here. Excuse me. See if we can get back to... there we go. Anyways, the production version of the knife, I had a generous viewer offer to let me review his, and I really, really like it. Those new ones are, a much more reasonable price, for people to get their hands on. This version of it, being a mid-tech, was $500 at the time, and I was late to the game, so it was very hard to find. I finally found a reseller that had a few, and I got my hands on this. But the new versions are great. I just really missed this one because it was kind of back right at the tail end of like the big, thick, overbuilt, chunky folding knives. And this was one that I could actually justify carrying. It actually sliced really well despite it being so thick. Definitely missed this knife. It was really fun to deploy with a thumb stud. Next up, the Grayman Sawtooth. Not my picture. A great picture, though, to demonstrate exactly how monstrous this knife was. This is the closest thing to a Praetorian tie that I have ever handled. This thing was 9 1/4 inches overall. It was a 4, but here's what's amazing. Full titanium, made in the USA, 20 CV steel. It was a $400 knife when I bought it. Excellent fit and finish. Very blocky design. Everything was stonewashed. It was very simple. It was a thumb stud only flipper. It had a recurve, which was not normal for me. I don't generally like recurves. It was massive. 187 thousandths thick blade, and then 187 thousandths thick titanium on both sides. Massive, massive knife. Combined with the fact that it was just huge, you can see there how big it is in that person's hand. That thing was an absolute monster. Unbelievably inconvenient and made no sense to carry, but it was an awesome conversation piece with the guys that I worked with. So it was really, really fun. I definitely miss that knife. They're difficult to get a hold of now. Moving on, the Les George Talos. A lot of you have heard me reference Les George a lot and how much I like Les George. I don't know the exact relationship between Les George and Rick Hinderer, but I know at one point he got some advice from Rick Hinderer, or they worked together. There's no collaborative knife between Rick Hinderer and Les George, but I know that they talked, I guess, or Rick Hinderer maybe gave Les George some advice at some point. But these knives are the only knives in this caliber that I hold almost in as high regard as Rick Hinderer knives. I hope that fluency was good. It didn't sound like a well-structured sentence, but I like them almost as much as I like Hinderer knives. This is a Talos. I want to say these originally went for $385, $400. I got my hands on one in the secondary market for a really good deal. It was absolutely mint and perfect. The smoothest feeling corners I have ever felt. Those titanium scales on this guy and all the edges, how they radiused everything, it was like glassy smooth feeling. It was almost didn't feel like titanium. It almost felt like it was something synthetic that was, like polished marble is what it felt like. If you've never handled one of these, the action is somewhere between the glassy smoothness of a Sebenza or a Chris Reeve knife and a new Gen 6 XM18 with the bearings on it, but these run on phosphor bronze. These are CTS XHP steel. They're about 8.5 inches overall. Love this knife. It's actually what the ZT 0909 was modeled after, except the 0909 was not nearly as good of a knife. These could actually slice incredibly well. The 0909 didn't cut bad. It was nothing compared to the Talos. Next up, another Les George knife. Probably one that, honestly, I can say that I like. This is called the Les George VCP. This is a version 3, which is the exact version that I have. I like this knife exactly as much as I like most XM18s. I mean, if it were a little bit off, it'd be like 99% to 100%. I wish that they had the lock bar insert on these. They don't. That's the only thing holding it back. But I loved the profile of this knife. The look of it was 8 1/4 inches. Full titanium, had a titanium backspacer. Mine had one of the Les George special clips with like the cross on it. Again, I got it for a great deal, and then for whatever reason, I decided to let it go, which is stupid. CTS XHP steel thumb stud opener, perfect ergonomics. Again, that glassy feeling on the handle scales. Just so much attention. I mean, it's plain Jane and monochromatic and stonewashed, but that's what I like. Again, this is not my picture. You can go back and look on Instagram, actually. I do have a picture of mine on Instagram. Mine looks like the whole thing is bronze, but it's actually just the filter on it that I used. It's painful to look at this one. Honestly, if you've never handled a Les George Talos or VCP and they look interesting to you, if you have a chance to buy one under $400 on the secondary market that's in good shape, buy it. These things are awesome, and they're hard to get. honestly, in the future, if I have a chance to get one of these with the monkey edge frag pattern on the scales, I'm going to do it. I just really miss this knife, and I want it back. That's how awesome it is. Moving on here. This is a Hinderer. I'm sure you guys are wondering, was there a Hinderer he regretted, an actual Hinderer he regretted not holding on to? Yes. I had a Generation 4 stonewashed fatty Spanto. You guys will be able to see there the F on the flipper tab. So I'm not really a fan of the fatty Warmcliffe, and I'm kind of, teeter-tottery on the Tanto fatty. It's okay. But something about a fatty Spanto is just really appealing to me. The Spanto is already overkill in terms of like strength in a grind, and then they bumped it from 165 thousandths to 187 thousandths, just making it incredible. I bought this on the secondary market, got an amazing deal on it, got it, and realized it was basically brand new. But I was like, I'm going to make this my user. And so I did. I used this knife. And then for whatever reason, I let it go because somebody made an offer. It was almost as much as I had paid for it. And I was like, yeah, sure. Now, these Gen 4 fatty Spantos are so rare. You never see them, especially the stonewashed ones. And they go for a lot of money because Rick Hinderer has not released a Generation 6 fatty Spanto yet. So I don't know why I got rid of this. This would be the one Gen 4 that I would have kept and would have loved to continue to use up until this day. But past me was an idiot, so I don't have it anymore. Moving on here, this is my picture and one you guys have actually seen on the channel. This is the newest generation of Medford Praetorian T. That's the skinnier one, not quite as big as the Praetorian Tie. This was a DLT exclusive version with S90 V steel, which was bizarre for Medford. It is bizarre for Medford, but they have a whole line of S90V exclusives from DLT. I took this picture, put it on Instagram because my XM18 3.5 inch right there that you're seeing, I still have it. That's my Grail with the textured titanium scale. That is also a DLT exclusive, and so I just thought that was fitting. Wanted to put it on Instagram. That's a $700 knife. It's expensive, but Medford has a distinct design, and he is a polarizing person, and he has polarizing designs. You either like his stuff or you don't like it. I like Medford's. I know that they're not nearly as practical as some of the other really popular knives nowadays, or at least for most people. For me, I can't justify carrying around a Praetorian T every day. That doesn't stop me from liking it. They are incredibly well made. They have the most satisfactory lockup sound I have ever heard. All of that titanium and steel clacking into place. Talk about actually sounding like a bank vault door. That's what a Praetorian sounds like when it locks up. I miss that blade so much. I'm going to move on for fear I might cry. Okay, the second to last knife. This is my picture. That is me holding that knife, sitting in a vehicle at the dealership. This is a ZT 0392 factory custom collaboration between Rick Hinderer and ZT Knives, meant to mimic the Hinderer Eclipse. This knife was very special to me. At the time, I was actually looking for the black-green model, which I eventually did find, but that one had detent lash, and this was well beyond the time where they were all discontinued. I think there were just a few of these left at retailers, these black ones. These were the last ones they did. I had found a green-black one, paid way too much money for it, and it had detent lash. Then I sold it for less than I bought it for almost immediately, and that put the worst taste in my mouth, and I gave up on these 0392s because I didn't want to take that big of a risk again. Originally, these knives were about $380. At the time, Hinderer did not have a lock bar insert, and they did not have bearings, so you could buy a full titanium factory custom ZT that mimicked almost perfectly a Hinderer knife with actual Hinderer hardware for over $200 less than it would cost to get an actual Hinderer in full titanium, and they didn't have bearings of the insert, which was considered better at the time. Now it's a different story, but at the time, these were like, oh my God, these are crazy. So somebody made me an excellent deal on this in the secondary market. I want to say I paid $380 for this thing. It was one of the first 100 serial numbers. And when I got it, it was mint. It was absolutely perfect. There's a little bit of smudges on it just from fingerprints when I took the picture, but this thing was perfect. No detent lash, no blade plate, nothing. It was just amazing. This is one of the dumbest sales that I've ever made. I don't know why I let this thing go. This thing should be in my house right now, locked up in a safe. I miss this knife so much. It was such an awesome knife. It had perfect action. That unique blade shape that was based on one of Rick Hinderer's old customs that they put only on the ZT 0392 models, or some of them. They also had Warncliffes and a Bowie. But, I miss it. Moving on here, the last knife. I'm going to just make sure the screen doesn't go dark here. The last knife is very, very, it's very hard for me to look at. It's actually the only knife that I sold of this group that I actually made money on, and it was the reason that I let it go. The idea behind this knife is that I was going to buy it and keep it. It was going to be a safe queen forever, and it was just going to be this beautiful, perfect thing. The way that I happened into it was lucky. I became aware of it from, it's a Medford knife. I became aware of it from one of Greg Medford's videos. He said it's going to this retailer. I immediately called the retailer and I said, I just watched this video. You've got this knife coming in. I want to go ahead and pay for it right now. Absolutely. And he said, okay. And then later on, I actually ended up selling it because somebody offered me substantially more money than I paid for it. And that was stupid. If I could go back in time and undo that transaction and just say, no, thanks for the offer, I'm going to keep it, I would, despite it probably not being worth as much money now. But that knife, and please excuse the picture, it's old, was a beautiful red Vulcan finished 3V, CPM 3V Medford Marauder. This was back when they were doing the full thickness Marauders, 187 thousandths thick titanium on both sides, and a quarter-inch stock thick blade. And again, that was CPM 3V, which was hard to get from Medford back then. This was right after he had just made the change to the hardware, where instead of the screws going all the way through into the titanium on the other side, there were now screws on both sides going into the standoff. That was a big deal for Medford at the time. Again, please excuse the picture. It's an older picture. This blade, I don't know if we're going to be able to see it, was actually a blood red with, that's blue and yellow and green there coming out to the blade. The entire blade was a dark blood red, and I saw that in one of Medford's videos, and I just freaked out, and I was like, I have to have that. The titanium was also flamed in this sort of neon electric blue all the way up the scale, and then underneath it was tumbled titanium. It was the most colorful knife that I had ever seen from Medford, and in the video, you can go back, it actually was Medford that was being sent to Action Concepts years ago. He picked it up in the video and said, this is the most beautiful Marauder that I have ever seen. And I was like, oh, I have to have that. So I paid right about a little under $1,000 for this. I want to say I paid $950 for it, which is really expensive. The offer that I got was substantially more than that. And I sold it. And I shouldn't have, because that thing was awesome. It was big and unnecessary and clunky. It did cut paper. I never cut anything else with it, but God, I miss that knife. And my plan was never to use it. It was just to sit and look pretty and just, open it up every now and then and take a look at it. And I know a lot of you guys are rolling your eyes there. Your biggest regret is one you weren't going to use. Yeah, it is. I actually would be interested to find out who has this now. It was sold on Blade Forums a long time ago, and I miss it. This was a super, super cool knife. But anyways, guys, that's about it for this episode. This is it's kind of crazy going back through this, kind of walk back through time of all the knives that got away. So it sounds like I'm describing a sad relationship that ended. But I miss all these. I know I know a lot of you guys can relate to this. I thought you guys might find it interesting. But that's honestly about it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was at least mildly entertaining for you guys. If you did, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So please check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel, because there's definitely more coming. If you have been a subscriber for a long time and you're enjoying my content and you'd like to support me, you can do so by following the link in the description of the video to my Patreon. You can support me for just $1 if you'd like, or whatever amount you see fit. It would absolutely mean the world to me. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.